I'm going to go ahead and start this recorder, and we'll go ahead and get started. I've got 3 minutes after. Appreciate everyone taking the time to join us tonight. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a consultant working on behalf of the Nashville Department of Transportation. That's NDOT. And that department, as you probably know, is the old Public Works Department. It's charged with all things transportation and right-of-way. And this traffic calming program is just one of many of the things that they do, and it's one of the main things that we help them with as a group. As we were talking about, this meeting is being recorded, and so it'll be available to you within just a few days of the meeting. Let's see, today's Tuesday. I'd say by the end of the week, certainly by the first of next week, it should be available on Metro's traffic calming website. And I'll give you some information about that here a little bit later. Respectful of your time and move this along. I want to give you a little bit of a background on the program itself and how Maplehurst got added to it. Secondly, we'll look at some of the tools we have at our disposal in trying to address some of the speeding issues. And then lastly, we'll try to get to this part as quick as possible because it's probably most important. Look at the plan, the very preliminary concept plan that we have put together for the street, and get your reaction to it. You all have the ability, these are usually pretty small groups, and so you have the ability to unmute yourself and ask a question or make any comments you want to as we go through here. Feel free to do that. Otherwise, if you would just keep muted, it's usually a little easier to hear. And then also, I do keep my chat window open, so if you'd rather just type a question or comment, feel free to do that as well. And with that, we'll get started. Traffic calming. The program itself has been very popular, and it really focuses on residential streets. We know that this becomes a safety issue as well as a quality of life issue in terms of traffic speeding on our neighborhood streets. And we don't do commercial areas or industrial areas. This program is really reserved for residential streets. And the best tools that we use, the most effective tools, I guess I'd say, are physical measures that we put into the street. We know that nothing really slows traffic down quite like that, and so that's really what we focus on. And we are focused on speed reduction as opposed to trying to shift traffic onto some other street. Some people want to engage the program hoping we'll somehow get traffic off their street. We don't attempt to do that. We just try to get traffic to slow down, drive more responsibly through our neighborhoods. We know that this is just a part of the issue that we're trying to solve. There's other ways to go about it, and partner agencies that can be very helpful. Part of that is we call them the 3 E's: the education component, getting out public service announcements, and those types of things to remind people about the impacts of speeding. Secondly is enforcement, and MNPD is a supporter of the program. I think we all wish, they could do more writing tickets at the corner and park a cruiser there, and that would be helpful. But we also know they're doing very important work and just don't have the resources often to dedicate to traffic enforcement. And that's where we come in. The DOT has under its purview the engineering component. We can affect changes in the roadway that will hopefully bring about slower speeds. And so that's the work that we do. And this is one reason why we do that. There's been a lot of national attention on some of the safety statistics that have been coming out really since probably COVID in 2020. Some of the impacts of speeding and fatalities on our streets, and this is one that just one of many we could pull, but showing the impact of speeding on other users besides drivers, in this case pedestrians. And so we know that if we can bring these speeds down in the very unfortunate event, if there is a car pedestrian crash, that pedestrian has a much higher likelihood of surviving the crash or walking away from that crash if speeds are kept in check. As I mentioned, this is a very popular program. And we say that to say that, when you all made an application for this program on your street, you're certainly not alone. They're in our latest cohort of neighborhoods that we chose to work with, we had over 500 applications, and so it's a problem all over the county, all different kind of streets and all different kind of neighborhoods, and so it's just something that we got plenty of work to do. Typically, we address about 50 of those neighborhoods per year, given our funding and our ability to do that. This past summer, Metro Council allocated some additional surplus funds that were available to the traffic calming program. I think because they saw what an outcry there was for additional assistance in the neighborhood, and so we're actually doing a few more than that this year. Um, One thing we always like to talk about briefly, just to plug it, make sure you know this resource is there and available to you, is Hub Nashville. Um, uh, there's nothing that needs to go in Hub as far as traffic calming, because you're already in the program and we're working with you. But you may sometimes people will want traffic calming because maybe they want additional stop signs, or they would what they'd really like is sidewalks and those kinds of things. And all of those are great requests, and really have their beginning here at Hub Nashville. So this is a resource that we have that's um, you can go in there and log all types of different requests, not just transportation related, but just about every metro department is represented here. Hub.Nashville.gov. You can also just pick up the phone and call one of the operators there at 311, and they can get that request to where it needs to go. A little bit about how we choose projects. So if there are 500 applications, we certainly have to whittle that down some and pick the ones we're going to work on. And this is how we do that. There is a prioritization process that is used when an application comes in. We begin collecting data on it, different kinds of data. Some of those you see here. 70% of the score that we use comes from both traffic volume, how many cars are on the street, and the speed that traffic is traveling at. That's the biggest part of it. The other 30% of the score has to do with some of those other aspects of other types of users. So, for instance, where it says non-driver accommodations, that's saying, does the street have sidewalks? Does it have bike lanes? Does it have transit service? Those types of things. If it does, and I'm aware that Maplehurst does not, um, if it does, that actually decreases your score. In your case, you don't have sidewalks, and so that increases your score, makes it more likely that you would be selected for the program. Trip destinations has to do with, are there destinations out there that someone may want to make a walking trip to? Are there parks? Are there schools? Are there shopping opportunities? Those types of things. And then we also look at, is there a documented case of a pedestrian crash? Fortunately, in your case, I don't think there was one of those. So, but anyway, all of that data we put together, roll that up into a score, and essentially rank all of those requests, and the ones on top are the ones we engage those neighborhoods with to work. So here's a little bit of the data specific to Maplehurst. The 85th percentile speed is just kind of the statistical way that engineers use to look at whether or not you have what we might call a speeding issue. What that's essentially saying is that 15% of all of the cars that are on the street, 15% of those were going faster than 36 miles an hour. That's fast. It's certainly faster than we'd like to see. It's not the fastest we've seen by any means. It's kind of middle of the road for streets that we engage to do traffic calming on. What everybody tends to remember is, yeah, 15% may be going faster than 36, but you tend to remember the guy that whizzes by you at 45 miles an hour, or maybe it feels like faster than that. And so sometimes that's what sticks in people's minds, and this speed may not look as high as you would expect. But the other The other big number here on the page is your street carries a little over 1,400 cars a day. That often surprises people that it's that many. Again, for us, that's a pretty typical number. That's middle of the road. We will do this type of traffic calming on streets carrying up to about 5,000 cars a day. So if that gives you any idea, we're well within our thresholds there. The street width becomes important when we start thinking about a design for traffic calming. You've got a very unique street. There are others like this that have this median down the middle, but that kind of a divided highway type of a feel is pretty unique in Nashville. Probably one of the things you enjoy about the street. And so I've put on here the street width varies pretty substantially. Up on the Granny White end, it's much wider. You all know they park on it for Lipscomb and things like that. That end of the street's about 35 feet wide. The part down there with the median, the creek running through it, 17 feet wide each side of that. So we kind of treat those independently. And the street the portion of the street that we're working on, the entire length of it, I guess, from Granny White to Leland, about a third of a mile. And here's a map of that. I know this is really small. It's okay if you can't read these. It's just a map showing the area, and your street is highlighted green, as are a couple of other streets in your area. Glen Echo is highlighted green. Caldwell Lane is highlighted green. That indicates that there is a traffic calming project just like this one that is somewhere in the works. It's not done yet. You're not seeing anything yet, but we're working with those neighborhoods just like we're working with you. There are some purple lines on the map on some of these streets, and that just indicates that those streets have an application in or on file with NDOT. They have not been selected. There's no plans to do traffic calming on those streets at this point, but there is an application in hand. And then you barely see one over there. It's Oriole Place, way over on the left-hand side of the map, and it's blue. It's a dashed blue line. And that indicates that those streets have already had a traffic calming project implemented on it. And we like to show those because that gives you some idea. If you're not familiar with some of the tools that we use, in particular our speed cushions, that gives you a place where you can go over and drive on those and experience those. This is a map that is available on the Metro traffic calming website, and it is interactive, so you can go into it and you can zoom in or pan all over Davidson County and see where all these selected projects are, and the projects that have applications and the projects that have been completed. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the tools that we have. Beginning with this one that I mentioned, the speed cushions. It's really the bread and butter of our program. I think a lot of people probably engage or request traffic calming just thinking this is all we do is speed cushions, and for good reason. It is pretty much all we do. We do a few other things, but the speed cushions that we use have a pretty good track record. We know how they perform. We know how they hold up. We know how people interact with them. And so when we tell someone you can go to this street and drive on it, and these will be just the same as what we plan to install on your street, that holds true. These are built in a manufacturing facility out of recycled rubber. So, you know, what we tell people are what they're getting is what they're getting. We're very confident in the quality of those. We do have some ability to modify or to design these. There are some design flexibilities here, a couple of which are obvious to you. You see some pictures here where there's 2 cushions side by side. In some cases, we can do 3 cushions side by side. We can do wider. We can do as many as it takes, with the idea being that we want to be sure that we extend all the way across the width of the road so that someone cannot drive around these. The whole way that these work, kind of like the old speed bump that you might have at Kroger or Home Depot. You got to encounter it. You got to run over it for it to be very effective, and it's the same thing here. I would point out, particularly if you can't see these pictures, what we're talking about is not a speed bump at Home Depot or at Kroger. Those are very abrupt and very harsh. These are much longer, which makes them smoother. I'm not saying they're wonderful. It's like driving on a cloud, but it is much different than driving over that very jarring speed bump. These speed humps are made to be in the road. They're made to be run over at somewhere around 20 miles an hour. And so we've got some before and after data that shows that, on average, people will drive over these somewhere around the neighborhood of 15 to 20 miles an hour. And so over the course of the project, we're able to bring speeds down to that target, around 20 and 25 miles an hour, which is where we hope traffic will be driving. A couple of other tools you see here. Sometimes we'll use our signage. Sometimes we'll use, like in the bottom right-hand picture, those little white plastic delineators. We don't want to do that if we don't have to. The reason we use the delineators, the signage is kind of a common thing, and I'll can talk more about that. But the delineators themselves, again, if we need something to discourage people from trying to drive around our installations, we might use something like that. The reason that these have gaps in between them, and there's not one continuous piece all the way across the road, the biggest reason, and the reason we use these way more than any other type of traffic calming, is because of the lesser impact they have to some of our emergency responders. So larger wheelbase vehicles like ambulances, fire trucks, those types of things aren't impacted nearly as much by the speed cushions as they are by some of the other things. They can almost straddle them. They drive over them in their wider wheelbase vehicle. They're not totally immune, but they can get through those a little bit easier than some of those things. Here's the close cousin to it, which is a speed table. It's basically what you just saw, but it doesn't have brakes in it. And for the reasons I just discussed, we don't use these nearly as often. There are some specialized cases where we might use these. I think the Parks Department has begun putting some of these in their parks, but again, the park is generally not a case where you see a lot of emergency responders having to get through there. But for what it's worth, that is another tool that we do have. But essentially, it's the same. It's made by the same company, same materials. You put them in the same way. All of those kinds of things. We do have some before and after data. I like this, but then again, I always try to caution you that every street is different. Every street is starting at a different speed threshold. What we're trying to bring down for you is 36 miles an hour. We're trying to drop that a little bit, but all in all, we're seeing speed decreases on the order of 9 to 12 miles an hour. But again, it just really depends on the length of the street and how much traffic there is and how fast it was going to begin with. Another tool that we have that falls somewhat into that educational category is the radar feedback sign. You may have seen more of these popping up on neighborhood streets. In terms of effectiveness, we certainly see an initial effectiveness, and these do collect data, so we can be pretty sure that they are having an impact. What we're still looking at, though, is that a sustained effectiveness? After these signs have been out there 6 months or a year, are people still responding to them as they might have when they were brand new? But it does essentially what it says it does. It gives you feedback as a driver, and so if you're going too fast, it will remind you of that. There's some flashing lights and things you can do to trigger getting people's attention to that. But it's a tool that we have. Sometimes we will do some narrowing. We know that when a driver feels like the pavement is really wide and they've got really good visibility, and just like in these pictures, you can see a long ways, it may encourage higher speeds. And so sometimes if we can visually narrow those lanes and make the driver feel a little more constrained, a little more uncomfortable, it's likely to result in a lower speed. However, we also know that, like in this picture, if we just add a center line like was done here, some people would interpret that to mean it is a more major street, and I could actually, it's appropriate to drive faster on that. So we do this very judiciously. Most projects we don't change the striping on, but in a case where we need to do that and try to further um, calm traffic using pavement markings, we can do that. And along those lines, there's even a little more aggressive approaches to that, particularly at intersections that are pretty wide. These are a couple of tools that we usually do in a little more urban areas than yours. Bulb outs, there's the picture on the left where we actually kind of bulb out the corner or the turning radius at intersections and try to narrow those up. Again, we're just doing that with paint and with those flexible delineators. Some neighborhoods are fine with that. Some say, I'm not so sure if that's the look we're going for, but it can be an effective tool. And the picture on the right is called a chicane. It's kind of an artificial meandering of the road, and so the driver, as they drive down the street, have to steer to the left and to the right to follow that alignment of the street. It works okay when there's parking, on street parking like you see here. But if you just do that with paint and nothing else, I'm not sure it would have quite the same impact. Again, this is a pretty specialized thing. It's only in a couple of streets that I'm aware of in Davidson County, and we haven't done any new installations of that in quite a while. The last one I'll mention is traffic circles. We've put I don't know, half a dozen in over the past few years, and I guess I would say that the city is still kind of assessing those. These can bring about some unintended consequences sometimes from larger vehicles like school buses and things, and even just normal cars. Some people get confused. Do I turn in, if I want to turn left, do I turn in front of that circle? Do I go around it? How do I navigate that? And so we don't use them very often. You got to have a very large intersection to have room for something like that as well. So here is the plan, and this is where I'll try to be a little more descriptive. Here is the plan, the concept, I guess, for your street as we have put it together. So over on the left-hand side of the Maplehurst is running east-west along the middle of the page. Over on the left-hand side is one end of our project. That's at Granny White, of course, right there at the Lipscomb entrance. And then over on the right-hand side of the page is the other end of our project at Leland. And in the middle, you see how the road splits right there. This is about as, I would say, as basic as it gets. It's got a little bit of a different look because of that divided portion of your street. But this looks very similar to a lot of projects that we are doing right now, and that is it's a series of speed cushions placed at 3 locations along the route. And I'll tell you how we come up with that. We look at the distance between one end of the project and the other. In this case, there's no stop signs. It's just one long stretch of unbroken driving in between Granny White and Leland. And so that distance is just under 1,900 feet. And what we'll do is take that distance and divide it by the spacing that we would like to see for these speed cushions. We know that if we can space these somewhere around 300 to 500 feet on average, that's going to bring about pretty good, consistent, slow speed on the street. It's not so many. They're not so close together that they're just going to feel obnoxious to you and push traffic to some other street. Then again, they're not so far apart that people kind of navigate one set and then hit the gas and just speed again to get to the next set. By the time you're going over one, you probably already see the next set in front of you, and it just doesn't make that much sense to speed up just to get there. And so we're finding that we can be around 400 or 500 feet. That's gonna work pretty well. In this case, that leaves us with 3 sets of speed cushions. That's an average spacing of 470 feet. We will typically cheat the ends, if we can, a little bit towards the ends, just so that if you turn off of Granny White or you turn off of Leland onto Maplehurst, you encounter that first set of speed cushions maybe just a little bit sooner. But some of the other constraints that we have are hills, which you don't have any of, curves, which you don't have any of, but you do have driveways. So one of the things we will pay a lot of attention to is to make sure we're not giving somebody a real headache and putting a speed cushion directly in front of their driveway. We're always trying to keep at least 15 feet. I don't think we'll have any problem in this case keeping more than that. We will maximize the distance from anyone's driveway in putting these down, and while still trying to maintain this kind of spacing. I have down there in the little picture just kind of a snapshot of roughly what that would look like, but that would only be true on that divided portion. So on each of those divided sides, on either side of the creek, at 17 feet, I would expect we'll put 2 cushions side by side. We don't have a need for anything else. There's not enough room, for anybody to drive around them at that. So that would cover us. But up on the Granny White end where the street gets pretty wide, we'll have to look at that. My initial thought would be that we would actually come with a 4 cushion layout and just go all the way across the street. So that would be kind of 2 on each side of the center line of the road. And then we wouldn't have to do any kind of delineators or anything more than that. But we may have a little bit of option there, if we wanted to see something different than that. But in any event, we would just have one location like that where we would need to stretch those speed cushions a little wider across the width of the road there. I have gone on and talked a lot, and this is the point at which you can comment on any of that I've covered so far, but especially would like to get any feedback that you have on this plan. Is it what you'd hope to see, not what you'd hope to see? What are your thoughts about speed cushions on the street?
Hey, Jeff, I'd just like to say thank you. I like the design. One add-on question, is there any way is this the same group that would update like the wrong way signs? Because at least once a week, someone's going all the way down on the wrong side of Maplehurst.
I'm making a note right now. It's really not, and this is what happens a lot at these meetings is people will say, we got signs that used to be there and have gone missing, or we need signs or whatever. And so what we'll typically recommend is that if you on your end will go into Hub Nashville and log that request, and at the same time on my end, we'll be going back to NDOT and say, okay, guys, here's what we heard at this meeting. And we kind of hit from both angles.
Okay.
That may be the best way to go about it, but that's certainly something that we will put in our notes back to the city about that. And so, is that coming from both directions before you get to the divided part?
Yeah, it's mostly just when they're turning left from Leland, and then they're heading up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's great. Thank you for all the information. Very thorough.
Jeff, is this a definitely happening situation, or is it still pending, or it's still being decided on, or where are we in that?
Sure. Let me cover that here with this next slide, or begin to cover it. I guess I got a little bit more of the presentation that's going to cover that. Before I do, any other questions, and we can come back to this, but any other questions or comments before I leave this while it's fresh? All right, if so, hold it and be sure I get back to it. But the question is this a done deal, or are we still working on this, or just where do we stand? So this is a little a figure that shows this process. We're here tonight at the Red Circle neighborhood meeting. What we will do tonight, based on what I hear in your reactions to that concept we just showed, is we'll go back and we're going to refine that. And so there's going to be another step which shows what I just showed you in more detail. It's going to show exactly the configure of these speed cushions and where we're recommending they be placed. And it'll say something to the effect of, that first step will be 72 feet north of the driveway at 123 Maplehurst, just to make something up. It'll be to that level of detail. We will post those design plans on the website. If you're interested in going and seeing them, we post all of these. Anybody can get on there and look at the plans for any street. At that point, we kind of have a decision to make. We can do another meeting if you want. That typically is not necessary unless we're hearing can you change something or for whatever reason we want to meet again. But what we used to do 2 mandatory meetings, and what we found at those was most of the time we got back together on the second meeting and it wasn't a whole lot more detail beyond what I just showed you. And so people said, well, can we just get on with it already and stop meeting? So we made this second meeting kind of optional, but you guys can tell me what you want to do as far as that goes. Once that design happens, whether or not there is a second meeting, the last step that we have is to go to an online ballot, and this probably gets more directly to your question. When we develop these plans and we post them and make them public, we go through a balloting process that we send out this information to people, and literally they vote, do they want to do this or not? And so I'll share a little more detail about that ballot, but that's the answer to the question of is it done? We try to work hand in hand with the neighborhood and work at your pleasure. We're kind of here for a resource to whatever the neighborhood wants to do with this. And some don't pass. Some of these we put out to ballot, and people say, enough people say, this is not for us. We're not interested. That we don't. I will say most of them do. And actually the results of all the neighborhoods are available on Metro's website. You can see that. But anyway, I hope that answers the question about how we go from here.
Yeah. I'm curious, are we in almost kind of a dotted line with Caldwell? I think we can all agree, like, one of our biggest problems is we're obviously between a university and its athletic center, so we're probably experiencing a lot of the same thing that Caldwell is. And so if it's done on one side, obviously it's just going to deter people to the other side. Are we kind of like hand in hand with them as far as where we would be on this time wise?
Yeah, you are. They just had their meeting. Actually, they were, I believe this is right, they were selected in the previous cohort, but they were just running way behind. So they just had their second meeting a few weeks ago. They are actually balloting right now. So I'm not sure how many more weeks they have in their vote, but they are balloting right now. So it'll be close. Just while we're talking about time frame, one thing I would point out here is that last bubble here, the construction bubble, and this is always bad news for me. It's depressing to say it, but after we get through the ballot, if it passes, we're still looking at a minimum year before any construction is happening. That's going to be true for Caldwell as well, though. So that's why I say, that looks like a big number and you're still out a ways, but so are they. You're tracking pretty close to that project over there, a block or so from you.
Yeah, how did this come about? Someone actually applied for the speed bumps to be put there?
They did. That's correct. That's a good question. All of these projects that we're working on in all 85 neighborhoods all began with someone putting in an application and saying, will y'all take a look at this street? But beyond that, then it becomes us, and we just go out and we collect the data. And it's really the data that points us to, we concur, we agree that we think this street deserves some attention because of the volume of traffic and the speed of traffic and all that kind of stuff. That's where it came from.
Is that application on Hub Nashville or somewhere else?
Like to do a new application or the one that was actually filled out for this? To do a new application, there are 2 windows that open up. You can't just go in anytime you want to. It's usually right at the beginning of the year. In fact, I don't think we've opened up our 2024 first application window yet. I think it'll probably happen maybe early March, something like that. So we do a winter application process and a summer application process, usually in August. And so during those, it only stays open for about 2 weeks. And so during that time, you can go in and you can file a new application on any street you want to.
Would you ever consider putting speed bumps on Leland?
Potentially, but I think what you'd have to look at for Leland is how much traffic is on the street. Anything more than 5,000 cars a day, we wouldn't do things like speed cushions on. We might do something else like the feedback sign, but that would be the main thing. The other thing is, I guess the other thing that keeps you kind of from, I wouldn't say out of the program, but keeps us from doing things like this is the posted speed limit. And I don't know what Leland is posted, but if it's 35 or more, we won't do the traffic calming either.
I don't know if it's
I don't either.
30 or 35, but it's gotten where they race between the two four-way stops, the one at Glendale and the one at Caldwell, and they just slide through here. I'm on the corner of Maplehurst and Leland, and it's almost like a racetrack because Belmont is now 20 miles an hour and Granny White is curvy and has a school zone, so they have chosen Leland to avoid those two, and they just fly through here. I know some of them must be doing 60 miles an hour, and some of those race cars have actually come through here, and the race motorcycles. So I know they put speed bumps down in front of Sevier Park on Leland, but I'm sure that's because the park is there, and I thought maybe because the school is here that we could get them up here.
Yeah. Well, I would put in the application. I don't see. I know you couldn't see this map. Let me see if I can tell. No, it does not show that it's had an application put in on it. So yeah, you
No, I was just talking about putting one in myself. That's what I was.
Right.
You have to get signatures for that, or
I believe it takes 4 residents of the street to put the application. Yeah.
And what about getting those what you were talking about, the signs that tell you how fast you're going?
Yeah, I would still start with the application process and then kind of see what the data says, and usually those feedback signs, if the street has more than, we'll go out and collect that data, and if we come back and we say we find that it has more than 5,000 cars a day, certainly if we find that, we can find out pretty easily what it's posted and decide from that. If we go out and took measurements on Leland and it was 6,000 cars a day, but they were doing 50 miles an hour, then I think it would be certainly justified to say, look, they don't meet the requirements of this program, but that's a very high speed, and put some of those feedback signs. They did that with a few streets like that not too long ago, so I think that'd probably be the best way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Let me talk a little bit more about this ballot. In the event we don't get back together, I want to be sure you've got the information on that. So when it comes time to ballot the project, again, we'll put those design plans on the website, and then we'll mail these cards out. And I appreciate the feedback about some of these cards not making it very timely. The good part about this is the ballot process is a required 6-week process, so that would give us a little more time just to make sure those cards are getting to the people and giving them time to vote. They're going to come to, I'll tell you who will be sent the cards and who is eligible to ballot or to vote on this. But once those cards get there, there's a 6-week window. You just go in and there's a website, or you can call a phone number there and talk to someone. You just give them your name and address information, and then it's as simple as you vote yes or no. And at the end of that 6 weeks, if 2/3 of the respondents are in favor of of the project, we'll order the materials and move it forward at that point. And like I said, most projects, by the time they get to this point, are meeting that threshold. The people that get to vote are the property owners who own property that abut the right of way of Maplehurst. So you see a snapshot of that here. I went ahead and highlighted Lipscomb. They're obviously a major landowner in the area. We let them vote on Caldwell. We're going to let them vote on. I think they own property on on some of the other projects that are close by to them.
Yeah, they own several on Maplehurst as well, several houses that they rent out.
Yeah, and so while they are a major stakeholder here, we don't give them kind of undue influence, because if we let them vote for everyone, they themselves could probably decide the fate of the project. And so we and this is true for any landowner, you only get to vote once. So it doesn't matter how much property you own or how many pieces you own, you only get one vote, just like everybody else. We do let you don't have any other land uses, I don't think. No churches, no businesses. Just that institutional holder. But I don't know if any of these are vacant. I don't think so. I think everything has a house on it. So yeah, I guess the main point is just understanding that we send these to the property owner, not necessarily the resident there. So if any of these are rental properties, that resident may not get those. Any questions on that, on the ballot process?
There is one vacant. There's a vacant lot that the house has been torn down. I think a contractor must own the lot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's also 3 houses across from me that Lipscomb now owns. That one has renters and 2 are vacant.
Okay. Well, again, with them being the owner, we'll just send them one card, and then what they do with it, who knows? We'll do the best to get it to somebody. But
I cannot see the map. Could you tell me if I'm included? I'm on the corner of Maplehurst and Leland. I don't have a street.
It looks like you are. I would say so.
Yeah, you are. Do you also go out to Rockdale, like your driveway or anything? There's the very corner piece of property is kind of funny shaped, and it actually circles all the way back around to Rockdale, it looks like.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And that's you?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you
Okay.
own the last piece of frontage along Maplehurst there. So yes, ma'am, you are.
Yes, I do. I don't have a street address on there, but I do own that property.
Yeah, we do that policy totally independent of where your access comes from. And
okay.
Likewise, we know people live on Rockdale that use Maplehurst just as much as any of you do, but they don't get the vote. It's just kind of a policy that we have to, just what we follow, and just sort of have to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, because they have to come out that way or go up one of the other side streets to get out on Granny White.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, I'm going to give you there's my contact information. And if you can't see that, I'm at Jeff Hammond, JEFFHAMMOND at Birch Transportation. Sorry, this is a mouthful. BURCH Transportation.com. That's my email address. Then the other email address that's on the screen is for actually the Metro employees who work in this program, and that is NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. And that's a generic email address, and that's because there are several staff members who have access to that for different areas of the county, so they can all access into that. Feel free, if you have questions, think of anything, or have any other comments, or need anything from us, feel free to reach out to me or NDOT or both of us and let us know that. We'll be as responsive as we can and get you the information that you need. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is being recorded, and this is how you would access that. This is the code and the website that gets you to the Traffic Calming webpage. There's just a lot of resources there. That map that we looked at is there. These these recordings of these meetings are there. The design plans are there. The ballot results are there. There's just a lot of information. Everything you could ever want to know about traffic calming is there. And that is TrafficCalming, all one word, .Nashville.gov. And based on what I heard with the concept, it sounds like you all are pretty well in agreement with that, and we feel good that we can go ahead and kind of flesh that out a little bit more and get that posted and move on without a second meeting. Is that correct?
I think it will help tremendously with the school traffic, especially at 3 o'clock when everybody's getting out on both Caldwell and Maplehurst. And, unfortunately, the people that used to use those for cut-throughs are going to go on down to Gray Bar and Grandview now, but they don't have the school traffic that we do.
Yeah, all right. Very good. Any other comments or questions before we sign off here? Again, we appreciate everyone's attendance and interest in the project, and look forward to working with you on this. If we can be of assistance in any other way, feel free to reach out and do our best to get you what you need. With that, again, thanks for being here tonight, and we will wish you a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.